I think I may have told you that before, but my grandparents lived in Dahlonega, and my grandmother still has a house there, and she's going to be 89 this year. My mother has a house in Dahlonega, and we were Navy brats, my sister and I, and we're all over the place, but that is where we came home. That was vacation. And if you've been up to Dahlonega, you know it's a mountainy kind of place, and now it's really folky and kind of, I don't know, it's just lots of millennials and coffee. But it used to be, a lot of hillbillies and moonshine up in Dahlonega when I was a kid. But my grandparents lived out of town, up in the right on the edge of the National Forest, and there's a hill. They live on the side of a hill that just kind of keeps going forever. But up the hill, there was a white church, a little a wooden church that probably set 50 people on the top of this hill. And they were some kind of primitive Baptist, I believe. And they sang only shape note music and no instruments whatsoever. And they sang like they wanted to peel paint off the walls. Oh, friend, we have teeth. And it was just like you could hear it echoing in 4-part harmony off the mountain. And you did not go to that church if you couldn't sing in 4-part harmony and shape notes. So it wasn't like you could just stand there and, kind of stay silent. It was you had to sing. And we could hear it. I grew up with that echoing. Every time I went to my grandmother's house, I could hear them all the time. They felt like they were up there on Tuesdays singing. And that memory is a lot of what is infused in this piece a lot. So there's movements in here that have that sense of kind of coming off the mountain style to them. And then other parts that are me, viola playing, classically trained, choral conductor who likes Beethoven, So there's stuff of that in there as well. This next one is a Rudder-esque piece. You guys have sung Rudder probably all your careers, and you have certainly sung Thanksgiving, For the Beauty of the Earth. And this movement is a little bit of an homage from me. I was writing the text, and he's got a setting of all things bright and beautiful. And so I found that I was having a difficult time writing my own piece without it sounding a little bit like Rudder, and finally I said, oh, whatever, I'll just let it sound in some spots like Rudder. So there's little phrases in there that come actually, not from All Things Bright, but come from For the Beauty of the Earth, that little turn at the end of the piece that everybody struggles with. So here, let's read a little bit. This is a little bit more churchy anthem-like. I think it's a little easier to get through. starts this thing where I say bless, and I love it. And it comes out of our in the Methodist church. I'm a Methodist now. We have a Cokesbury hymnal. It's this little paperback hymnal from the 30s and 40s, and this one is in there. And I have always loved it. And this is a whiz-bang Salvation Army band piece. And it was written for the Salvation Army. So it's I wanted it to sound like a marching band piece, and it does. This is the one where all the grief has gone down. We get to have a little bit of a party. So this is the party movement. So let's try it. We'll go from the top, and it starts in unison, but it breaks off pretty quickly in just a second into some harmony. Okay, but we'll do it kind of slow, just to spare you all. 2, 3. Ready? 2 and 3. I have found a friend in Jesus. He's everything to me. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He's a lily of the valley. In him alone I see all I need to cleanse and make me fully whole. Here it comes now. In sorrow he's my comfort. In trouble he's my stay. He tells me every care of him to go. He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. And then it takes over with a flute and violin kind of duet there. The next entrance, he all my grief has carried. Let's pick it up there, and we have a key change. He all my grief has carried. That's the pickup to, that's the one. Right. See it? Ready? 1, 2, and go. He all my grief has carried, and all my sorrows home. In temptation, he's my strong and mighty tower. He had all for him forsaken, and all my idols torn from my heart. Keeps me by his power. Though all the world forsake me and trials leave me worn, through Jesus I shall safely reach the goal. He's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. Now in tempo, 1, 2, and 3. He's the fairest of 10,000. Bluegrass mass kind of feel to that. And so that one begins the middle movement, which is all about the friendship of God. And this middle 5th movement, and it's pretty easy, and we've still got some time. This is the centerpiece of the Requiem Mass, and I took the Piesu theme from the very opening to the very closing. So it calls to mind the opening of the "Consider the Lilies," and in this case, it transitions straight into this idea of the transfiguration of Jesus, and the whole thing of this movement is a cross structure. So it's solo, choir, and then solo choir together to create the first macro structure of the Trinity. And then throughout, you hear it in 3 phrases, and they're always lifted up. So there's a bottom phrase, a top phrase, and then it comes back down. So you get this thing that looks like the 3 crosses on the hill a little bit. And that is how this full movement is structured. And the whole Mass, I feel like origami. kind of folds outward from movement 5. So I use the text from the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is the second verse of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, where it says, "In the beauty of the lilies, Christ is born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me." And I set that up because I want that transfiguration idea to be front and center as we go into the words Pie Jesu Domine, Dona eis Requiem here in the center, which is Blessed Jesus, give us rest. Okay, so here's that D for movement 5. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. Pie Jesu Domine, Pie Jesu Domine, Dona eis Requiem. This is the note the main command on, and Pie Jesu Domine, Pie Jesu Domine. Soprano altos, and Dona eis Requiem. And orchestra. That's the center of the movement right there. And Dona eis Requiem, guys. Dona eis Requiem. Jesu Domine, Pie Jesu Domine. Here you guys come in. Dona eis Requiem. So that's how it works. In your portion of it, in the center moment, you'll notice that I moved from the key of G to the key of E major and back to the key of G. The entire Requiem does that. So almost every other measure movement is in G or some form of G, or an E or an E minor, or in one case E flat. I use those letters to showcase movement throughout, and so it's also part of the macro structure of it. Whenever out of the blue E major comes in the middle of something, it's always associated with resurrection. And so in that case, in the middle of that, we got to E major in the center of the entire Requiem Mass in E major, and it was there designed to showcase the idea of the plea for resurrection. This next piece is, as we move into this next half of the end here of the Requiem, when my daughter was 7.5 or 8, she took piano lessons when she was 5. And she, at the time I didn't recognize her little genius, but she could sit at the piano and sing and play at the same time when she was 7 years old. And so we have a recital where she's playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and singing Dorothy's part, and just, and we've got a recital video of her singing Amazing Grace at her piano recital in her little white dress and singing it and playing it. I didn't start doing that until college. That wasn't something I did. And here she was, a 7-year-old. Well, I came home one day, and this is before I moved here, and she was sitting at the piano, and she had taken my music journal that I write my composition ideas in, and begun to write a song. And I sat down, and she's asked me if I would help her. So I sat down, and we spent about an hour and a half, and I was just helping her. I didn't try to force her. I just said, what does it sound like? And I would tell her, I think it's this note. And I helped her write down this little love song that she got off of Disney Channel, I'm sure. And she called it "I Got the Storm's Eye," and it was all about her breaking up with a little 7-year-old boy. And she doesn't matter what you say, I got the storm's eye. I'm calm, and it was really kind of snarky and fun, and a lot like my daughter. But it was a really great memory. An hour and a half I'm really grateful that I had with her. So after she died, we found it. It took a while. I didn't know where the music was, but I found it. It was in my office in a box since I'd moved. I boxed it up. And I took it out and I started playing it, as part of this process. And then I played it for my mother and my sister at Christmas last year, not this past Christmas, but Christmas before. And they found it very meaningful. But it didn't seem like it fit in the Requiem, because it was a little love song, or actually a breakup song. But I started working with this text, which is from Isaiah: when you pass through the waters, do not fear. The floods will not drown you. And then I started looking at the Elijah passage, where Elijah runs away from the king, and he's in the middle of an earthquake, but that's not the voice of God. And then he climbs the mountain and he hears the whisper, still small voice, and that's the voice of God. So I began working with those texts, and I wrote almost like a little country hymn, because I wanted it to match the country hymn or the place in the music that number 3. I wanted there to be a hymn in this one, so I kind of wanted 4 and 6, those two mirror movements, to act like country hymns. So Lily of the Valley, and I wanted something of my own. So I started writing it, and then I found that if I took the Storm's Eye refrain, just the refrain part of my daughter's song, and changed it to I am the storm's eye, it says I got the storm's eye, but I am the storm's eye, that it fit the passage. And then I could include something personal into the thing. So this movement is, and that will be it for the night. We'll run through, we'll break for prayer in just a second. I do want to sing through it a little bit. So you can hear it, because it's a little bit of my daughter's voice in there, and my voice as well, and I think that it is, in a microcosm, a lot about what this requiem is about. So let's try it. I think it'll feel familiar to you, because it sounds like an old country hymn. 1, 2, and go. When you pass through the waters, do not fear. When you pass through the waters, do not fear. When the winds of grief assail you, I will be with you. When you pass through the waters, do not fear. It's all in unison here. And I am the storm's eye. 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 When the winds of grief assail you, I will be with you. When you pass through the waters, do not fear. Excellent. So this next entrance is in the sopranos and altos, and it's into the key of G. There's a misprint. It's a really nasty one too. So I'm going to go ahead and I've already wrote it in Emily's music, but your notes are not C and F. They're D and G on the words when the, okay, or when the earth. And they're in unison, altos and sopranos, so it'll be D and G and then up to the B. So it's just a G major. When the earth, it'll feel normal. Okay? Let's try it. 2 and go. When the earth around you trembles, do not fear. When the earth around you trembles, do not fear. When your griefs fall asunder, take refuge in my care. When the earth around you trembles, do not fear. 2, 3, and storms, storms, breathe, and I am the storm's eye. I am the storm's eye. I am the storm's eye. When you breathe, take asunder, take refuge in my care. When the earth around you trembles, I'll be there. Next entrance is when you pass through fire. We have about 1 minute left, so let's try that. Okay, when you pass through fire. 1, 2, and go. When you pass through the fire, do not fear. When next section, we won't go into it tonight for weeks. I began to use more and more of the text of Song of Solomon, because Lily of the Valley is based off of Song of Solomon, the hymn is. And I wanted to begin incorporating that aspect of it as we consider the lilies, when we consider the texts that are specific to where Jesus is called the lily of the valley and the rose of Sharon. And so the text, Set Me as a Seal, was sung at our wedding, but then I found out that Renee Clausen wrote his version of it when his child died. In the hospital, his wife had a late miscarriage, and at her hospital bed, he wrote the choral piece. And so it put a whole new meaning to me at that point. And so I wanted to include it. I wanted to include Set Me as a Seal, not only because it was on our wedding, but as a statement of grief and loss. And it says that many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it, which goes right back to what you just sang about the floods and the storm. And so it's the next step in the journey. And then eventually we get to the Easter moment in Movement A, which is Arise, My Love, which is what Jesus says in Song of Solomon as he comes to his bride, Arise, my love, after the rains have gone, is what it says. And the flowers appear and the singing bursts forth, and the foxes run through the vineyards. And so that, to me, that's kind of more of a vision of heaven than anything else. And so I wrote that in there as the eighth movement, Arise, My Love, and it's a circle dance. It's supposed to be like an old shaker dance. So I wanted it to be kind of a mountain dance in that sense. So it's a round dance, is what it's called. Not a square dance, but a round dance. And then the final movement is the opening requiem movement again, but now in key of D and in unison in the choir. And it's a mirror image with the soprano. She starts the piece, and then y'all sing the requiem part. And here at the end, it's the requiem, and she ends the piece with the Consider the Lilies text again. So now we get to all sing it at the very end. So that's kind of how the piece ends. Emily has a fantastic recording that was produced in rehearsal tracks by Matthew Curtis, and I don't know if you've used him before. He's the guy that sings all y'all's parts, ladies, way up there, and then sings the low bass and a B flat. He's crazy. So he did the whole thing, and another choir paid for him to do it, but I get the use of it since it's mine. And so I shared it with her, so she's hopefully going to be distributing it to her. The demo is great because it's got the full orchestra in there. You can hear it and hear him singing. There's a couple little mistakes, but we won't worry about that. But it'll give you a sense of the piece. It takes about 32 minutes to sing through. From a liturgical standpoint, I've been recommending to people that the opening requiem is a great opportunity to bring lilies in at Easter as a way to, almost like a hanging of the greens, but a setting of the lilies, from a processional standpoint. Because I think it's kind of neat to have that in your hand and just say, consider the lilies. And at the end, when you bring it back, it's a little bit different when you're talking about the lilies at that point. My pastor at our church, I told her I think it would be really appropriate to, at that ending, rather than have the flowers in your hand, actually have the children of the church come forward at the beginning. And it might be a nice way we're doing it on the Sunday after Easter, so that's our approach to things. I really appreciate y'all having me here, and to get to go through this with you. So I know that you've got an opportunity to have a prayer, and I'll stick around for a while. I'd love to talk to you if you have any other questions about it, and I hopefully soon we'll be back with you at some point, particularly before your performance, so I can spend some time once you've got through it a little bit further and have learned it and everything, and we can delve even deeper.
So thank you.